want to welcome all of you for being here and for having both Nathan and Alex with us. So what I would like to do is I'm going to briefly introduce. So Nathan Law is a shareholder at Cornerstone Law Group, where he specializes in estate planning, criminal, and juvenile law. His work focuses on helping families and individuals navigate complex legal matters, from drafting wills and trusts to representing clients in criminal and juvenile court. With extensive experience in litigation and advocacy, Nathan is dedicated to ensuring his clients receive fair representation and legal protection. His practice includes both advisory roles and courtroom litigation, giving him a well-rounded perspective on the legal profession. And then Alex Hutchinson is an associate attorney at Miller Nash, a nationally recognized industry-focused law firm with offices in Alaska, California, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. Alex specializes in sports entertainment and media, mergers and acquisitions, and business and corporate law. Whew, that's a lot. She advises clients ranging from athletes and entertainers to major corporations, helping them navigate legal complexities in business transactions, intellectual property rights, and corporate mergers. With a background in both business and law, she brings a unique perspective to the legal field, focusing on negotiation, contract law, and brand protection in the fast-evolving entertainment and corporate industries. So with that, what I would like to do is have everyone go around, say your first name. You can do your pronouns if you would like, what grade you're at, what school you go to, and why are you here? What brought you wanting to come to this Curly today? So we're going to start this way around.
I'm Natalie. I go to Glencoe. I'm a senior, and I'm just interested in like law and doing something with the law. I'm Kylie. I go to Glencoe. I'm also a senior, and I'm here because I'm like interested in becoming a lawyer. So, yeah.
Can you speak up a little bit? Nice.
I'm Ari. I'm a junior, and I go to base. I'm here because I am interested in.
Nice.
My name is Athena. I'm also a junior at Local High School, and I'm here because I want to explore.
I'm Elijah Lott. I am a junior. I go to Hill High, and I'm here because I'm interested in a career in law.
Great. Well, you guys are at the right place then, and I'm really excited with the presenters that we have here today. And so we're going to start with you, Nathan.
Sure.
And
we didn't cue your slideshow.
Sure. I'll help some of my notes from.
Oh, Sonny, do you want to turn the lights down a little bit?
Lights. Okay. Why does it not look like that on there?
Technical difficulties. So Nathan, can you share your career journey and what led you to specializing in estate planning, criminal, and juvenile law? Because it seems so very, each seems so very different.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll start with kind of my law career and those fields, but I'll take you quickly all the way through from high school to now, so you guys have an idea of kind of how I got here. So when I first started as a lawyer, my first job was doing juvenile dependency work, which was representing parents and kids in cases where DHS child welfare was involved and they needed to step in for safety reasons and have temporary custody of the child. So that's where I started. And then I started working on criminal cases and just a lot of things that were just courtroom related. And so that was like primarily the first like 10 years of my career. I've been doing this about 15 years. And over the last several years, I've started getting away from that and moving into the estate planning side and things like that. mainly because I got a little bit tired of having to always go by the court schedule and not my own schedule. But also because, as the owner of my firm, that was an area that I needed to go and pay more attention to. So it's kind of a little bit personal, a little bit practical. But if you want to go to the next slide, I can run through a couple of things. So I asked AI to read my mind, and this is kind of what it came up with, in a very graphic novel sort of way. That's kind of how I see myself when I walk into a courtroom, basically kind of a Jedi slash lawyer. But I've practiced for, well, more like 15 years now, 14, 15 years. My last name actually is Law. I didn't think I wanted to be a lawyer though until halfway through college. It wasn't even on my radar. I had nothing, so it had nothing to do with my name. I am the owner of a 5-attorney law firm here in Hillsborough that's been in Washington County since it actually got established even before I was born. So I kind of came into it later. I have a wife and 2 kids, and I've lived in several states and a couple of countries. And then if you want to go to the next slide, that'll get me more into my kind of career journey. So I was homeschooled K through 12. So before it was cool. I don't know if it's cool. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's still not cool, but I was homeschooled, and I went straight from from that into a 4-year school. I went to Pepperdine University in California. That's where I was from at the time, Southern California. And I studied history. I thought I wanted to be a history teacher, is what I thought I wanted to be. I love the subject. And so I thought, man, if I could just do this and just be involved in it and teach people that, I still love it. But then I realized you have to do a PhD. And the PhD program just seemed like way too much like writing and studying for things that I didn't want to spend that much time on. It didn't seem like it would be that practical, like helping individual people with any actual real problems. And so I kind of got disenchanted with that. I took some classes in alternative dispute resolution. And so that's more of mediation, negotiation. So things like solving a really practical dispute between 2 people, having a neutral person in the middle who can kind of talk to both people, figure out what their needs and desires are, see where the overlap is, especially when it's like when they're really angry, at each other. They can't solve the problem themselves. They need somebody kind of in the middle. That's what got me interested in the law field, because I was like, this is what I want to do. This is something that I can use my interpersonal skills. I can use my knowledge to actually help solve interesting problems and still kind of work with people one-on-one. So that's what got me into it. And that was about junior year of college when I kind of switched and realized, okay, I think this is what I want to do. I did 3 years law school, which is pretty typical. Some people can get it done quicker. Some people, if they're working full-time while doing it, it takes them 4 years or longer. And that was in another state. So that was in Minnesota, where I went to law school, and then came back to Oregon. And I'll get into advice later, but that was a hard transition because I wasn't established here. Like I didn't go to law school here. I didn't really have contacts here, so I was kind of going in blind, and that was kind of difficult. It took me 7 months to find my first job. And then that 2.5-year job that I mentioned before was something that I didn't even know existed. I didn't know there was this juvenile dependency law where parents needed attorneys, kids needed attorneys, and usually the court would appoint an attorney at no cost to the parent, and certainly no cost to the child. Sometimes the child could be a baby a few days old, could be a 16-year-old, and so those were the kind of cases that I started taking on. And several years later, I moved to a new firm where one of the original owners was looking to retire and did a transition plan. And so that's how I got to be where I am now. I'm the owner of this firm and doing a lot of those kind of responsibilities and business stuff in addition to just typical practice of law. So it's a pretty big mix. So that just talks about the criminal and juvenile courtroom kind of thing is working with people who are kind of forced to deal with the legal system. So it's a more reactive thing. You're somebody that's in their corner, helping them, guiding them, but it's kind of reactive. You're not out there going to go do something. That's why they call it criminal defense, right? You are defending against something. Versus estate planning, which I started doing 2 years ago. It's more proactive and you're working with people to figure out what they want to do and giving them some ways to maybe go and do it and create. So, yeah, that's kind of my journey on that note. So I talked about the types of cases a little bit already, but just so you have an idea, so the juvenile dependency is up there on the right. And the goal of that is just kind of family reunification. So I work with caseworkers, I work with social workers, other lawyers, a lot of court staff and judges and things like that. And there's a lot of court time. And it's a lot more of a relaxed courtroom experience. It's more of a room like this as opposed to like at least in Washington County. Did you guys go to Juvenile? The Juvenile
Yeah.
building? Okay.
Yeah.
So you saw, that's where, there's like 2 little courtrooms, there, and it's kind of different from the big Washington County courthouse. So it's a little more relaxed in that sense. It can be really intense in terms of the subject matter, which I'll get into later, but the goal is family reunification. So the law is centered around if there's a problem with the kid's safety or health or well-being, the goal is to make sure the parents have what they need to be able to fix the situation and be able to just be a good parent for their kids. In fact, the legal standard is pretty low. It's minimally adequate, which I try to be more than that as a parent, but like some people are, they have outside things that affect that. And so it's a lot of, it takes a lot of empathy, a lot of patience. Sometimes you kind of feel like you're a little bit of a social worker because you're not dealing with legal arguments day in and day out. You're dealing a lot more with somebody's life and the situation and making sure that they're getting the help they need. And so that's kind of a different type of thing. That also involves lots of different kinds of law. So federal law, sometimes even Indian law or administrative law and all these different types of things that you have to know and kind of weave together. So, and then the other one, which I'll go over just very quickly, is just the adult criminal cases. So those are anything from DUI to theft to assault, people getting in fights, a trespass on somebody's property, things like that. And that one is very individual, right? Like I said before, it's you defending somebody, they're forced to deal with this legal situation and you're defending them, making sure their rights are taken care of. And the delinquency is, juvenile delinquency is usually kids from anywhere from 11 to 17. I didn't realize that kids that young could be charged with a crime, but they absolutely can. And the goal there is rehabilitation. Right? It's kind of like, hey, you screwed up. You got to know how serious this is, but we're not going to, put you in jail or something like that. It's really just working with them and their parents to understand what the consequences are and to get the help they need again. So that takes a lot of, empathy and interpersonal communication and stuff too, because you're working with someone who's the client, but they're a lot younger than you. So any of you guys have younger siblings? Yeah, okay, so, I'm sure you've had a situation where you've tried to explain something to them and they're just not getting it, and you're like, you're an idiot, and you just give up, right? So it takes a lot of patience to try to describe like actual legal options to somebody that might be 12 or 13 years old, so it takes a little bit more time, it takes a lot more building trust and stuff like that, because, why should them or their parents, trust you to help this kid, right? It's a pretty big deal. And then the estate planning stuff, I talked to you about, the biggest thing for that was when I first started into law and I was learning more about estate planning, I was like, great, you write a will. Like, how hard is that? You draft documents and here you go. It's easy, super simple, and there's not much else to it. as I started, learning about it though, it was much more of, I need to know what individual people need. And then figure out what the end result is gonna be. So not just creating some document that says leave everything to my kids. Anybody can do that. You can get AI or, Google to do that for you, right? So it's more of figuring out how is it going to work for this particular family and what do they need and what are the reasons they want it. They want to leave everything to their kids. Well, great. What does that mean? If they're still not 18 yet and can't take care of themselves, then there's a lot more planning that has to go into that, for instance. So that's something that I really enjoy, is just getting to the point of learning about individual people's family, their situation, their needs, and then what their goals are, and helping them try to achieve that in a small kind of legal way. So yeah, that's the types of cases. I might be running over some of your guys'
Nope,
questions.
hey,
but-
we can roll with it,
Okay,
so,
okay. Do you
that's
guys
good.
have questions right now? I wanna get questions from you guys as we go, if it's just like. It pops in your head, so. But not yet, okay.
and then if anybody online has any questions, you can put it in the chat.
I honestly can't remember what slide's next, so why don't you go to the next slide? Oh, okay. Was there any, I have a question for you too. So was there anything surprising you guys learned from like the trip to the courthouse? Was there anything that you thought was, oh, this is exactly what I expected, or this is totally different than what I expected? Was there anything that you would call being surprised by?
We went into the courtrooms and the first one was like a lot smaller, like condensed than I imagined it being. And like people were just coming in and out, and it wasn't like a quiet situation. It was kind of just like all of this hustle and bustle while someone's actively like being charged with a DUI. And I was like, oh, okay.
Did it feel like it wasn't as like somber or serious in that moment?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it still felt serious, but like, I don't know, just a lot more chaotic than I imagined it being.
Gotcha.
When she was on the tour too.
And it was just very like a lot, but just wanted to be like quiet and
Okay. Okay. So you got to see part of the trial, sounds like. Okay. Do you remember what type it was or anything like that? It was what? Domestic abuse. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So even then, there were still some people going in and out, huh?
Yeah.
Do you remember if there was a jury or not? Was there a bunch of people sitting off to the side? No? Okay, okay. Yeah, so that's a good, that's a good observation there. I'll go into that a little bit. So that's well, you guys have been there, some of you, that's the Washington County Courthouse in Hillsborough, the outside of it. That is not the inside of it. That's just a random courtroom. They don't really like to take the pictures of the inside, so. But what you can see there, typically what I would be doing with my client is that's a picture of somebody who's in an orange jumpsuit in custody in jail, and sometimes they're behind something. Most of the time they're not. Most of the time I can get right next to them and all of that. But so sometimes I'm kind of standing there like that, talking to a judge. More often than not, it looks like probably what you guys saw, where you got me and one other person sitting at one of those tables, and then you have an assistant district attorney, who's the person prosecuting the case on behalf of the state. At the other table, you got the judge, and sometimes you'll have that row of 6 or 12 people as the jury, if it's a trial. Sounds like you guys were looking at hearings and just kind of churning through stuff. That's very typical in terms of kind of a day-to-day thing that we spend time on is that, like, well, we're in a lot of hearings like that almost every day. And you're just trying to find a moment to talk to the prosecutor or to the judge's staff or something, and it's a little chaotic. So if you enjoy a little bit of chaos, but you still like following rules, it might be a good thing for you. Does anybody have questions, but, oh, and what I was gonna say, so the trial that you witnessed was probably what we call a bench trial, meaning that you don't have to have a jury. So whoever's charged with the crime can choose whether they want a jury of the, 6 or 12 people to make the decision on guilty or not guilty. Or they can just say, no, I don't want a bunch of people, I want a judge who knows the law better to make the decision instead. So it sounds like it was probably, that's what we were doing, so.
Yeah, and that one had, there was a
That one was-
witness that was, they had called a witness up there and they were asking, well, actually, there was 2 witnesses we saw, and they were just asking questions of the witness, so.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
One
see,
of them
that's-
was the victim too, wasn't
Mhm.
the woman
Oh, yeah,
there
at the
who
end,
was-
yep.
Yeah, the one that her group sat in was it was a lot for them to.
like, talking about physical harm.
Yeah.
Talking about.
And showing all the photos and yeah.
Yeah, that's
that was-
pretty intense, yeah, yeah. So there's, there's what I love about the trial aspect. The preparation part is probably the most important. And that takes time and making sure that you're well acquainted with your client and know exactly what their goals are too. Because not every client wants the same thing out of the trial, but the part I enjoy the most in a trial is probably just once you've done the preparation, you're in it, doing it. There's always the surprise that seems to pop up no matter how well you prepare. There's some kind of weird surprise, somebody doesn't show up or they answer something you weren't expecting, or the other way or something a little screwy and you're like, that's kind of weird. But that's the part that's, pretty exciting to me. So I will miss that part, but if you want to go to the next slide, I think if that's some examples. Questions?
Let's try that. Okay, there we go.
Oh, okay, so these were just a couple of quick examples. I tried to keep it to the more interesting, more court related ones. So, okay, the juvenile dependency. So you have, imagine you have a new mom, and a couple has their first baby's a couple months old. They take the baby into to a doctor's appointment, and they notice one of the nurses notices some red marks on the baby's head. And they kind of ask the parents about it, and the parents are like, I'm worried about that too, I don't know what it is. And they keep asking questions, and they can't really figure out what these red marks are on the baby's head. There's no other injuries per se, but it's kind of some redness on the baby's head. And so the nurse is a mandatory reporter, and all attorneys are mandatory reporters as well, of child abuse or elder abuse. So
Do you guys know what a mandatory reporter is?
what,
Okay.
can someone describe it for me so that I have an idea that you know what it is?
Like, if you tell, like, say, like a school counselor about somebody who's a mandatory reporter, if you tell them something that's like incriminating or harmful, they have to report it to like whoever's like their higher ups or whatever.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty much it, is that if there's like harm to you or harm to another child, or anybody under 18, then yeah, they have to make sure that gets reported, usually the child services. I was just called DHS. So, so that's how sometimes these cases get started, is something that a mandatory reporter reports or sees. Sometimes it's from, like an abuse situation where there was a kid there too, or something really terrible that just happens in the moment, police get called. But in this example, so DHS gets the report and they think, oh man, we don't know what this is. They call it an unexplained injury. And they don't know what it is, but they think the kid is in danger because, well, it could have been something purposeful, right? It could have been something that maybe was abusive or that's dangerous. And so they can't explain it either, but because the parents can't explain it away and the medical doctors don't know, and they see it as something that could have been a physical abuse, DHS files a petition with the court, and within 24 hours, there has to be, or one business day, there has to be a hearing in court. And so sometimes my firm will get a call from the court saying, hey, there's an emergency hearing. We need you to represent a mom. Or at least that's this example. And, we might have an hour to try to reach this person or get to court and talk to them and explain what the hearing's about and say, hey, we got this report, we're just learning about this too, let's figure this out. In this example, we had a good outcome, which was there was ultimately non-abusive medical explanations for the redness on this little baby sack, right? Everybody in court wants the same thing. Parents, DHS, they all want the baby to be safe, right? But there's disagreement about what that looks like and what that means, especially if the medical professionals don't agree on something. And so that's a situation that, we represented the mom for a couple of months while we figured out what was going on. And during that time, the baby was able to stay with them and wasn't in foster care or something like that. So that's just one little example. This one is kind of it's not a specific example, but it's pulling from a couple of different cases that we've had. So a teen goes into a store. I'm picking on you guys because you guys are teens, but we represent teens that, they do some dumb stuff sometimes. They go into a store, they put some clothes in a backpack, let's say it was on a dare. Let's say it wasn't even their idea. And as they're leaving, a loss prevention officer tries to, grabs them and says, hey, you gotta stop, don't leave, right? Get into a fight while they're leaving, because they think, oh, let go of me, right? Just like, why are you grabbing me and stuff like that, right? Pretty reasonable. Scary if someone you don't know, not a police officer, comes and grabs onto you and all of that. Well, the problem with that is that made the state not just charge this kid or this person with theft for stealing some clothes, but also with robbery in the 3rd degree. They might pull a gun or a knife or something, or say, hey, give me your money or something. It's not that kind of robbery, but because there was physical, pulling away and they still had the stuff with them, the way the law is written, they can charge somebody with this felony charge. And so it made it way more serious than just like, I stole a sweatshirt and I'm gonna pay it back and I didn't get in trouble, that kind of thing. So this is an example though too of where the client was like, okay, I did this, I totally stole that, I shouldn't have done it, I'll admit that. Admitted that, and the judge said, okay, great, we'll talk about your consequences for that later. And I tried to get the district attorney to drop the robbery charge because they had already got rid of the stuff. So by the time the loss prevention people grabbed them, and by the time they got into this kind of accidental fight, they didn't have the stuff with them anymore. It was on the ground, 20 feet away. And so it wasn't robbery. They were just trying to literally get away from this person, not with the stuff. And the DA didn't agree with me. And so we had to, even though they admitted on one part, they said, yes, I'm totally guilty of that. This other part, we said, they're not guilty of this worst. And so that was like the reason that they went to trial. They weren't saying I'm totally innocent of everything, but sometimes you have to have a trial or have that ultimate contested thing if the legal parties don't agree. So yeah, and I think that's all I have. Yeah. So even though I will say something about this Lincoln quote, because it made me think about when we were talking about the linear versus, like, I didn't know I always wanted to be a lawyer and that kind of thing. I think the thing that's been linear for me is working with individual people. So kind of just like real people, real solutions kind of thing. And also this idea of being a peacemaker or a peacekeeper, because I remember when I was like 8 or 9 years old on my soccer team, that was like my nickname was like peacekeeper law. I think they thought it was more like a police thing, kind of like that. But when I started doing those mediation classes I told you about in college, it kind of clicked with me that, oh, that's kind of my personality, that's what I like to do. And so law just happened to be the way to do it. I just didn't know. So, thanks. Happy to answer any more questions you have too. So.
Do any of you guys have any questions right now? Anything online?
Mm-mm.
So with the mix of everything that you do, how often does your work require you to go into a courtroom? And when you say like preparing, do you have a team that helps you do the work, like a paralegal? What does all that
Sure.
look like for
So,
you?
yeah, in that criminal and juvenile world, it's almost every day I'm in court for something. I might be in a trial once a month, maybe, sometimes less than that. So it's not always like a big trial like the one you saw. It's a lot of the kind of hearings that you guys saw. And those don't necessarily require a ton of preparation other than just communicating with the client and then, reviewing information ahead of time. Because the hearing itself is usually kind of short, even though you might be waiting for an hour, or something like that. With other preparation in terms of trial, that's where sometimes I get help from my legal assistants. In terms of like organizing documents or photos as exhibits that I want to present and things like that. But I really take a pretty, and it might be different in different firms, but I take a pretty hands-on approach to creating my own kind of trial binder. And I always, I typically will type everything out, but usually for like my questions and things like that, I'll want to have those printed out as well, just because like, I just don't want to be stressed if my computer screws up or something, stuff like that. So I take a pretty hands-on approach to making sure it's kind of all lined up.
Do you have a team of paralegals, or do you have who specialize, since you do adult, criminal, and then juvenile, and then estate planning?
Yeah. So we have two full-time staff who help us as legal assistants. We don't have anybody in our office that's a licensed paralegal. We just have legal assistants, and some of them have like bachelor's degrees. Some of them only have a high school diploma. So it depends on a lot more, for us, it depends a lot more on the person and their abilities than necessarily where their education level was. To help with more of the estate planning things and stuff of that nature. Typically, we like somebody that has a college degree so that we know that their reading and writing skills are pretty on par. Yeah.
And then how do you get your clients? Do they come from referrals, marketing, or other sources?
Question. So we have some attorneys who do mostly court appointed work, and that'll come from just the court. So the court will say, these are all these cases right now in Oregon, there's a huge lack of criminal defense attorneys and stuff like that. You guys have seen some of that in news. I see you nodding. And so there's a huge need for it. And so we do that, even though we're a private firm, we're not like a state-run agency or a nonprofit or something. We do a lot of those cases as well. So some cases come from that, and then other ones come from just word of mouth. And then, so like past clients that we've represented, just referring people and saying, hey, I did my trust with these people, or this person helped me when I got a DUI charge, go talk to them. And then another big one is just maintaining a good presence on Google. We have a website, and we try to keep up on our Google reviews. And honestly, probably over half of our clients seem to say, yep, I was just looking for a local attorney close by. You were close, it looked like you had good reviews, so that's why I reached out. Yes.
So when like you're looking for a job, like what do you look for in like firms and stuff?
My first job, I was willing to take it. In fact, the story I didn't tell about that was I was looking for a long time, and I was like, okay, I can't, if I really, I became a lawyer, this is what I want to do, and if nobody's hiring right now. It was in 2010, and it was kind of, there weren't a lot of firms hiring, because it was kind of right after that big financial collapse thing. And so I was pretty open to anything, which is kind of how I got into it. So one is being flexible. but, I also, I was like, I'm gonna just hang up my own shingle, I'm gonna start my own solo practice and just start learning and doing stuff. The day I like officially opened that is when I got my first job offer from this firm, so then I was like, okay, like, this is what it took. So I was like, all right, God, and then, but. So that was the reality of when I first started and kind of but what I looked for in a firm. When I made the transition from that one to another job, it was a very lateral thing. I didn't take a lot more money or something in the next one. It was really, do I think I'm going to be able to learn from the people there? And do I feel like this is a place where I am gonna feel proud investing myself and my time and my career in and being a part of that team? So I was really looking for a good team. And so the firm that I moved to, I felt kind of had a good reputation, had people that I admired there that I thought I could learn from. So that was kind of the main thing.
How would you say like working hours differ between working for a firm or owning a firm yourself?
That's a good question. It depends on how much casework I decide to take on. And it goes up and down a lot. I'll tell you that like over the last like 5 years, my hours have been like 45 to 50 hours a week. Because I've chosen to keep it at that. And I could do more casework and make more money. I'm just not gonna do that. And so having the flexibility of that is for me is worth a lot. And beforehand, it was probably similar in this particular, in these, smaller firms, but I know it's very different. The further, because some, because some firms are just different, so. Yeah, it's good.
So you talked about how you do 45 to 50 hours. What does kind of like a typical day in your life look like?
Throughout the week, I have a couple of like set meetings with my team, some with my business manager, kind of my executive team, right, that we meet once a week. And then every morning, just for like 5 minutes, I meet with them too. And then a lot of times, a typical day, will look, for instance, a lot like yesterday, where I had a court hearing in the morning that took about in total, with going there and doing all this stuff, maybe an hour and a half of my time. And then I had several phone calls and a office meeting with a client. And so that, and a lot of emails. So that's a pretty typical day. Tomorrow, or like I said, so when you're doing the criminal defense and some of those other things, you'll have a trial that'll take up a few days. I have something, a juvenile trial starting tomorrow that'll take 2 or 3 days, probably. And it's kind of hard to know how long it's going to take. That's pretty rare. So it's a lot more of like a little bit of court, and it's kind of a nice mix. So it's never a dull day, really. I don't know, it's a fun day, but it's never a fun day. Two independent things.
Are you required to complete continuing education courses to maintain your license, and what does that process look like?
Sure are. So you report every 3 years, is that right? 3 years, yeah, because it's 45 hours. You have to complete 45 hours, I think it is, every 3 years. And then there's certain types of classes you got to take. So some of them are for ethics, some of them are for the mandatory news reporting that we talked about. And then a lot of them you can just get general credits in whatever specialization you want that's applicable to you. So that's really nice because you can get connected with organizations that focus on like, okay, this is the tax, estate planning section, like it's really, narrow. Or this is the juvenile delinquency, conference that they have in Newport every year, so we've gone to that every year. And so there's some that are in person, some online, but yeah, you're definitely required to keep up on it.
Speaking of education, what pathway did you particularly take, if there was any at all? Like you said, you wanted to change to lawyer. You said you wanted to change to lawyer, from historian.
Sure.
Was there any specific classes you took or a pathway you did?
Not really in undergrad, except for those like negotiation and mediation classes I told you about, those were helpful. But for undergraduate, so when you're getting a bachelor's, you can get a Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts. Doesn't really matter, you can get any kind of four-year degree typically. And then you can, once you're in law school, you can start to specialize, but really the Juris Doctorate, the JD degree that you get after the 3 years is a general degree. You can do anything. You know, right now, either of us could go try a murder case or do something else theoretically if we wanted to. You know? Yeah, exactly. I don't get that. But so it's pretty general. The specialization in law school, I felt like came more from specific classes that you wanted to take, or I did an additional certificate program that was kind of optional, and that was in like mediation, negotiation, arbitration, like these things that were kind of more outside of court. Some people really focus on the courtroom kind of stuff. I didn't, which is weird, but I then later ended up doing all of it. But some people do mock trial and do all that kind of stuff. So you guys have done that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Right now. Right on. Okay. Who's the lawyer that you're working with, or are there some, or is it just like Hamlet's?
I don't think I was your last name.
Yeah, from where it used to be. I think it's a DA.
No,
No, not the DA. Okay, maybe it's. Sorry. That's cool.
I'm not bad.
That's okay. That's okay. But yeah, so you can, if you wanted to start like earlier doing stuff, some of that's some pretty good experience. I wish I had done more of that, more of the like, mock court and mock trial kind of stuff a little bit. Just a little bit. You don't have to make that your main thing necessarily, especially if you're like, well, I don't want to do trial work. I don't want to do court work, but it's good experience. And then I feel like over the course of my both educational career and law career, anything related to like psychology and business really helps. So if you're doing undergrad and you're just not sure what to do, like my history degree is fine. It helped me be a good writer. That was a big thing. So I would challenge yourself in writing and in kind of thinking about just like interpersonal psychology and that stuff.
I would imagine that would be really useful, especially working with juveniles, like just that childhood development and brain development and
Totally.
yeah, so that gives you that
Yeah.
better perspective, from looking at it, like what actually is going on with this child and not from an adult perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, because that's what I find a lot of my advocacy in juvenile delinquency in particular is reminding the judge or reminding the DA or reminding like if two kids are getting into a big fight at school and the person that is identified as the victim, their parents are upset too, right? They wonder why this judge won't lock up this other teenager that fought their teenager. I don't know. Just reminding them that, hey, the way that your brain is growing and works is different, right? And you're in a courtroom arguing this law stuff about it, but there's a lot of that kind of just at least baseline level of a lot of these different other areas that are really interesting to learn and then apply to a legal situation. So you do have to learn a lot of other areas.
I want to piggyback off of your question, which was, so you graduated with your undergrad at Pepperdine in California,
Yep.
and then you went to law school in the Midwest.
Yep.
How did you pick your law school and that process of what's important to look at, right? Because we all know there's Harvard and Yale, which kind of are those gold standards out there, recognized standards out there versus going to a smaller, what's some of the advantages and disadvantages?
Yeah, I was looking at the school I went to in Minnesota, which was University of Hamlin. So it's just a small school, nobody's heard of it. And then Pepperdine Law too was the other one. that I looked into. So some of it was practical. I got waitlisted at Pepperdine and they wouldn't let me defer for a year, and my then new wife and I at the time already had plans to go teach English in Japan for a year. So I was just like, nope, you know what? Well, I'm gonna prioritize this other stuff. I like this other law school. They let me defer for a year. So it kind of just worked into my plans a little bit better. The other reason I was hesitant to do law school there was just the cost of living in Southern California. Like, you know, it's in Malibu.
Yeah.
So it's like, I barely skated through undergrad. I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna make it in law school, or there, you know, so some of it was kind of practical like that. And then, also some of it was some of the financial aid. I would highly recommend working hard ahead of time to limit the amount of debt you go into. And I think that should be a pretty big consideration for you for college too. Because when you, even if you're like, oh man, get into Harvard Law, but I'm gonna have to pay, I don't even know how much it is now, 130 a year or something, or some kind of ridiculous, maybe it's not that much, but some ridiculous amount, or I could get like half the tuition at this law school that I think shares my values. No one's really heard of it, but it's, you know, it shares my values, or it's local to somewhere where I might want to live. You know, that was something that I didn't do. I didn't really know where I wanted to live at the time, so it didn't matter as much where I went, but I learned I didn't want to stay in the snow in Minnesota, so it's like, come back to the West Coast. But that was a difficult thing, was transitioning from somewhere, because law school is a great time to start interning places and making those connections with firms and all of that. So I didn't do that, and I kind of wish I had. It would have been a little bit easier for me. So.
Did your school help you find those, or if you were interested in that, does that school help with setting up those internships, or is that
Yeah.
something that like you have to do on your own to go
That
seek out?
school was very good about it, and they helped a lot. But again, it was kind of all local. And so what I found was I still had to be the one to really initiate it. Like, there were programs there for them to help you find externships, get practical experience, or volunteer, but I had to still be the one to like go and ask them, hey, how can you help me with this? I'm just thinking about this, and kind of initiate a conversation.
And speaking of internships, like, what was the transition? How well were you with that? So,
The transition from where to where, law school to
law school to internships, like, how easy was that?
it was just fun. Like, looking back, there are things that I look back and cringe and just like, oh man, I would have done that differently. So I like, my example for that is, well, my example for fun is I got to, even as a law student, I got to go into a court, just like the one you guys went to, and help with their small claims. And so I got to be a volunteer mediator. You know, when I was like 22, and these people are looking at me like, you're gonna help us? And I'm like, yeah, I'm here to help. Like, let's do this. And I get to mediate small claim stuff. So maybe someone was arguing over damage to a car, or some weird contract or something, or they took my pet, or, you know, and I try to mediate this. That was just fun. I had an internship with an immigration judge, which was far and away the best experience I had in law school in terms of an internship. But I look back now and I'm like, man, I was a helpless, like, I didn't know anything, you know. So looking back, I'm just really grateful for the patience everyone had with me. And I think I would have worked harder maybe to try to find more of the answers myself, or take more initiative on things that were going on around me, and just look for ways to be helpful. I think I could have done a lot better at that in terms of the transition.
Any questions down there? So in your bio, it says that you're a shareholder at Cornerstone Law. What does that mean? And then how does that differ from being an associate or a partner?
Mainly in so my firm, my law group, is organized as a professional corporation, which isn't that much different than like an LLC or a regular big, you know, corporation, in that there are shares. That's what the ownership is. So being a shareholder just means you're on some level an owner. I happen to be the only shareholder right now. I wasn't at the beginning. There was two of us, but So that's kind of where that designation comes in. I could put owner on there, but I don't know. I like the idea of trying to keep it more as like, this is a team, you know, it's not just all on me or about me kind of thing. And then in terms of the difference, like, I am ultimately responsible for, you know, the ethics of the firm, the business practices, the money. So that's the biggest probably difference, especially in a small firm. Or if you're a solo attorney, is just knowing how to make sure you budget, make sure you know what a profit and loss statement is, and all these really basic business things that you have to just pay attention to constantly. So, and then another big difference is like, I'm ultimately the one that has to make sure our trust account is okay. So people put money into a trust account with us. And I mean, most firms have to have this, but, and we have to make sure that's accounted for like to the penny, you know, like whose money is in there that we're basically safeguarding until it needs to get used for something and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of like non-lawyer stuff, business stuff, and it's takes a lot of my time.
What are some of the biggest like legal challenges in your specialty fields today that you're kind of noticing, facing, anything like that?
Good question. One of the most obvious, like broader ones in Oregon right now on the criminal and juvenile side is just the need for more attorneys. There's just a huge need. I find that when I look at like family law and stuff too, so like divorce and custody and things like that, it seems like there's always people trying to find lawyers for those areas, because it's hard work, you know, it's a lot of hard work. And then I think challenges, I think the rapid pace of technology changing is a pretty big one. And so for example, I have a lawyer that works for me, he's 74. But he always, you know, I'm his boss. It's kind of weird because he's never wanted to do the ownership side. Like he's never wanted to do, he just wants to do the work, you know. And so there's a lot of wisdom in that, if that's what you want to do. You don't want to deal with, you know, HR things. So, for instance, like it's hard to get him to embrace new technologies, right? And it's hard for me to do that sometimes. So that's the rapid pace of which it's been going in the last 10 years is pretty intense. And then still trying to make sure that the quality and the relationships with people are still there. So that it's not just all emails, electronics, but.
And so how is technology, including AI, influencing like estate planning and criminal and juvenile?
I think on estate planning, it's definitely making the document creation part a lot faster. And a lot easier, which means that, you know, it's more accessible to more people, which is good because more people can do really basic stuff even without an attorney too. What that means, I think, for changing my role or lawyers in general who do that kind of stuff is more figuring out what that individual person really needs and wants and what it actually means for them and how it's going to actually work out, you know, on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's a big thing on like the estate planning side. And then sometimes in more court-related work, for instance, if we have this new situation or a new motion we need to file or respond to, and we've never dealt with this before. Sometimes we'll use AI to help us create a starting point of saying, okay, this is the situation, you know, what kind of stuff do we need to look for? And sometimes that'll give us like a hint of, okay, we can really look at these cases and start putting this together so that it speeds up some of the initial search process if you're just totally out of it. So that helps a lot. It doesn't write your stuff for you. You don't want it to just yet. It's not in that yet. Most of this part, but it does a pretty good job. So
You still have to have that strong background in research and being able to have that critical thinking.
you do. And you have to really, a lot of times it's about, there's so much information out there it's not so much about going and finding the info now. Now it's about recognizing the most important 2 or 3 things that you need to communicate out of this huge mess of good stuff. Like, there's all this good stuff, but the best stuff is what you have to identify. And it's like 2 or 3 things maybe that focus on it. So.
And then where do you see yourself going with your career in the future? Is there like, I want to do less of this, and I would like to maybe start to add this to my practice?
I'd like to, in terms of my firm, I'd like to add one more practice area, which is family law, which we have done a little bit in the past, but I'd like to add that area. And personally, I would like to really be able to focus on families with kids, and be able to work with them on just creating plans for the future so that they have a legal resource that they know they can always depend on, and also not being as locked down by the court schedule. That's definitely a thing that I've enjoyed a lot, but I'm also kind of ready to like do something different.
Being a criminal lawyer, have you ever had situations where you're like, I don't feel comfortable taking on this case?
100%.
And so how do you handle that?
There's 2 main situations where I should be saying no to a client up front. So if someone's coming to like to hire me or something like that. One is just either the subject matter or the expertise, I think requires more than what I'm able to really adequately give, right? If I don't think I can really be the best lawyer for this person, I'm probably not going to take your case, So one is just kind of expertise, knowledge level. Do I have the expertise for that? The other one is if I just get a bad feeling in my stomach or in my head where I'm just like, I'm not going to enjoy working with this person. For whatever reason, they creep me out, whatever it is, right? Or maybe they're just, their goals are seem really unrealistic. I take a look at their case and they're just like, I want to be not guilty of everything and I want to sue the police. And I'm just like, no, it's not based on what I'm seeing. Like, I can't get that for you. So you're going to be unhappy with me as your lawyer. I'm not going to be able to get you what you want. So those are some times where I'm like, no, I'm just gonna say no, even if they have a lot of money or something, right? Some lawyers are just like, well, if they're paying client, I'll do whatever they want, right? There was another show we were talking about with Scandal, but in Scandal,
Oh yeah.
Olivia Pope and her lawyers were always kind of like, we're gladiators in suits, we go out there and we do whatever it takes kind of attitude. And I kind of disagree with that. I think it's not right for you just as a person, and it's not really right necessarily for the client or the overall system either. So.
Well, and you did touch on earlier about like the ethics, where ethics comes in. And so can you like share a little bit about like what the code of ethics is in your specialty practices?
Let's see. Running through it all in my mind right now.
Do you guys know what code of ethics is? No. Okay, well then that's a good question.
Well, for me, the practical part of it is always thinking about it from your client's perspective and what they need and how would I feel about the situation if I was in their shoes. So that helps me a lot because that usually covers most of it, because some of the ethics are, one, like I mentioned, being at least minimally knowledgeable, at least about the practice area, right? So I'm not going to go and do personal injury law right now because I'm just not educated enough. I'd have to go educate myself more first. So there's those kind of ethics where you have to be competent in the area. There's kind of an area that's really important that's around communication. So just making sure you're communicating with your client, keeping them updated, communicating with the court, or the other attorney in the case, if there's another attorney in the case. And those are some of the big ones. The other really big one it's not unique to law, but it's more unique than most other kind of ethics is conflicts of interest. And that has to do with, you don't want to represent two people who are opposed to each other, right? So in the most simple case, you're not gonna represent, well, the husband and wife in a divorce, you can't, but also if, there was a person involved in one case over here that you used to represent, and now you get a person over here who's opposed to them now, you have to think about, oh, like, is that hurting my former client, or is that, is that gonna make me not wanna help the new client as much? You gotta kind of think about making sure that people are protected and have their zealous leaders working for them, so. Those are kind of the main areas that I think of.
Thanks.
Alex will pick up on that.
Yeah. Well, if you have any further questions that you want to ask Nate, then you can write them down and we'll have more time for Q&A at the end there. So with that, thank you so much. That was very interesting. So Alex,
Yeah,
your turn.
all right. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I'll just talk. Alex Hutchinson, so I work at Miller Nash. It's a relatively big firm, big for Pacific Northwest. We're not nationwide, but we are considered big law for the Pacific Northwest. Which I can talk about a little bit more later what that means. But I kind of split my practice, so I do half mergers and acquisitions, and within that, it's mostly in franchising. So if there's, say, a franchise, do y'all know what a franchise is? Like McDonald's, right? That's a big one. So every McDonald's you see is franchised out. So someone goes to McDonald's, says, I want to open a McDonald's, and they're a franchisee. So we represent franchisors, which would be the McDonald's in that situation, buying up some of the franchisee locations, things like that. Or they're required to do these filings every year in certain states. So we'll help them with those every year. So then I also do some acquisitions that are not related to franchising, but just basically buying and selling businesses, right? And those can range from, I've done one that was like $30,000 up to $160 million. So very different in size, all different industries, can be anything from restaurants and bar studios to, honestly, some industries that I understand, so can't even explain. But a lot of like manufacturing and stuff like that. And then the other half of my practice is sports, entertainment, and media. So that one's pretty fun. You can probably guess what it entails. Sports, entertainment, media. So that within itself has a couple different facets. So there's the sports side where we represent, as Karen said, some sports teams, some players. We do some sponsorship deals for teams, so we'll represent the sponsor who's actually sponsoring a team, things like that. And then the entertainment media side, that's a lot more like YouTube influencers, different licensing. So that's IP, right? Your name, image, likeness is a really hot term. Have you all heard of, what name, image, likeness is? NIL, very big in college football and sports right now. So I'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's my general intro.
Well, can you share your career journey and what led you to the specialization?
Yeah.
What did you want to do when you were in high school?
Honestly, I wanted to be a professional ballet dancer. Clearly didn't do that. So I, in high school, was very into ballet. I actually went to a private school to get better at ballet and hopefully get into an Ivy League school. I did neither. Ended up going to Portland State, and I majored in economics, which was not so much my choice. It was more my parents like, you can't be a ballet dancer, that's not real. And very archaic way of thinking, because you absolutely can and should do whatever you want to do with your life once you're an adult. But anyway, so I ended up studying economics, which was fine, but there's not really like a clear path out of college into like a very specific field to work in with that. So I actually went into finance for a little bit. I'd always thought about being a lawyer since I was younger and just kind of put that off. Mostly because after college, I was like, there's no way I'm going to more school. That's insane. 4 years is plenty. And it actually took me 4.5 years to graduate. I did
4.5 years from fourth year undergrad.
Yep. I did minor in dance the whole time. So I did still get to take dance classes, which is great. That satisfied my need for that. But ended up working in finance for a very brief period, didn't really love it. So from there, just kind of worked as like I was working at a distillery and a brewery at the time, running their social media and then serving as well. And just kind of figuring out what my next step was. And one day I was just like, I'm gonna buy an LSAT book and see what happens. So if you don't know, the LSAT's the test, kind of like an SAT you have to take to get into law school. So I bought an LSAT book and just one day I was like, I'm going to law school. So for the year in between, while I was kind of applying to schools, I did a AmeriCorps service teaching year. I highly recommend if anyone has heard of AmeriCorps, or if you've like thought about it,
Do you know
amazing
what-
opportunity.
Do any of you know what AmeriCorps is?
So it's a program that offers services. They have a bunch of different programs. The one that I did was called Math Fellows. So we would go into a school. So I was basically a teacher for a year without being a teacher. And we would teach kids who were behind in their math scores, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. We'd just be kind of a supplemental teacher. So they'd come out of their normal class once or twice a week and work with us to just kind of, figure out some of the areas they were struggling in and get better at some of the basics before they moved up a grade and didn't know what they were supposed to know the previous year. So did that for a year. It was great. Being a teacher is insanely hard, and I respect everyone who does it so immensely, but I was like, not for me, law school. So I went to Willamette in Salem, if y'all haven't heard of it. Very small school, one of the 3 law schools in Oregon. Why I went there, since I'm sure that will be a question. They gave me the best scholarship. I knew I wanted to come back to Oregon. I applied to some schools in Denver. That's where my service teaching year was. Didn't love Denver, wanted to come back, really missed Portland. And I thought Salem was close enough that I'd be in Portland all the time, which didn't happen. But yeah, it was a lot of it had to do with the financial aid, because as Nate said, taking on a lot of student loans, law school is pretty expensive. And I would not say like it was absolutely worth it, but if you can cut costs anywhere, it is definitely worth it. So I ended up at Willamette and graduated in 2020, which y'all probably remember what was happening in May 2020. So by graduated, I mean I didn't get a graduation. I got a YouTube video that was 10 minutes long congratulating us. So didn't have to take the bar, which was actually really cool because the bar exam is scary. The Supreme Court in Oregon decided, since we were struggling through COVID and couldn't have 300 people in a room, that they were just gonna let us not take the bar, which was the only class to ever have that, and probably will be the only class until, well, I guess now there are alternative programs, but like Nate, took one of the first jobs that I could get, because that's kind of what you do when you're offered a job. It's like, yep, okay. And did business litigation, which is, so business, there are two main practices of law. There's litigation, which is where you're in a courtroom, you're getting sued, being sued, or criminal, right? You're being charged, that sort of thing. And then there's transactional work, which is writing all the contracts that have to do with the stuff that eventually turns into litigation, things like that. So I was in litigation, which is all lawsuits for businesses, and some securities litigation, which is like stocks, bonds. We don't really do bonds, but things like that. Didn't really love litigation, and a position opened at my current firm, Miller Nash, in transactional work in these practice areas, and I just kind of fell into it. One of my best friends works here, and it was great. She's like, "Come work with me." I was like, "I can hang out with you every day." Absolutely, I'll do it. So it kind of just, it was one of those, I had a plan and none of the things I planned went the way I thought they would, and here we are.
That's pretty cool that you have that, like you were at Portland State and then going over to Willamette. Had you looked at law schools elsewhere around the country? Like you said, you knew you didn't want to be in Denver, but
yeah, not really. I thought about maybe Vermont, but I didn't have any connections there. It was more just like ooh, that sounds like a cool school. But otherwise it was all Oregon. I did apply to University of Idaho since I'm from Boise. And that actually would have been the cheapest option, but then I would have lived with my parents and I didn't want to do that.
So can you tell a little bit more about how do mergers and acquisitions impact businesses and what exactly is your role in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So mergers and acquisitions, it's right, a business could merge with another business. Acquisition is one business is getting acquired by another business, or individuals, sometimes it can be even individuals. So basically what it means is one business decides to buy up another. You may have seen, I'm trying to think of a good example that's well known, but like if a business buys another business, and it like changes the name, right? Or the marketing, and they become all the same name. So that would be like a business acquisition. What I do in that is basically we represent either side, buyer or seller. Our client will come to us and say, it could be at any stage. They can come to us and say, hey, we're thinking about buying this business. Like, okay, great. Well, what are the terms? And usually it's one of those, oh, we talked about this or that, but we don't entirely know. So we'll put together an LOI, which is basically defining all of the terms that they want in the deal. So you'll use that as kind of an outline of what it's going to look like and what the terms are, right? We're going to sell it for, let's just say $1 million, and we're going to do this and that and this sort of thing. And this is what we're buying. We're buying, let's say for example, it's McDonald's and they're doing an asset deal. They'll buy all of the stuff that McDonald's owns, right? So all of their restaurant stuff, that sort of thing. And so our job is to basically help them do all of this due diligence. So if they're the buyer, they have to go look at everything that this business has done, right? They want to know all of the secrets, all of the bad stuff that might come up, if there are any lawsuits, if there are any agreements they have with other parties, all sorts of stuff. So that's a whole due diligence process that can take, depending on the size of the business, anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months. And then we draft a bunch of contracts, which is actually the fun part. So it'll be the purchase and sale agreement where you're actually buying the business, right? They're usually somewhere between 20 to like 80 pages. So some of it's a lot of like, you can reuse some provisions, but everyone is so different deal to deal that it takes hours to put these together. And you're defining, every single piece of the business, like, oh, your trailer broke down. Okay, we have to talk about that, how we're going to handle that, things like that. And so we negotiate back and forth on some of those terms. We can help with the business negotiations as much as needed, but some things just, it's the client has to ultimately decide because it's them purchasing or selling their business. And then we close the deal and money gets exchanged and ideally everyone's happy. For the most part. So it's a pretty hectic thing, a lot of different tasks to keep track of, a lot of different documents. Most deals I work on take anywhere from 2 for the smaller one, 2 months for the smaller ones, up to like some I've worked on have been up to like a year, just with so much back and forth and exchanging of documents and things like that. So yeah, it's a lot.
And what does your team look like?
So that too depends on the deal size. For almost every deal, there will always be the partner who's leading it, who's, this is their main client, and everyone else who's helping on it is just working for that partner. So there will be a partner, sometimes 2 partners if the deal's big enough, an associate. So that's the role I felt. We'll always have a paralegal, and then we'll have fill-in folks. So the nice thing about the size of firm that I'm at, we're what's called a full service firm. We have tax team, we have and like environmental team, we have an employee benefits team, we have labor and employment. So there will be pieces of these deals that like big tax implications. Like, I'm not reading the IRS code. Like, that sounds awful. So I send it to one of our tax folks and say, hey, you already learned this. You were a CPA in a previous life. Can you review this piece and, let us know what we need to be concerned with? So we refer out some chunks to people in our firm, but for the most part, it's 1 partner, 1 associate, 1 paralegal.
Nice. And then how often does your work involve going into court? Cause I think of like Suits and like we were talking
Uh,
earlier, and you see like all these mergers and acquisition deals and they're in and out of
That's-
court.
Very wrong on Suits' part. I literally never go to court ever. I actually, that's part of why I left litigation, because I was like, I don't want to wear a suit. Like, this is the nicest I've dressed in a couple months. I wear like jeans and like a nice shirt to work most days. Which is, it's very funny. You see the litigation folks who do go into court dressed very nicely every day. And then you have the transactional folks who sit at their computer and write contracts. And we wear like jeans and tennis shoes every day. So it's a very, you can tell who in the office does what, which is really funny. And obviously we dress up for, you know, events and things, but the only reason I've ever really gone into court was maybe for some pro bono things. And even that's pretty rare. I mostly do pro bono that doesn't involve court. So
Do you guys know what pro bono is?
it's awesome. So pro bono is basically, as an attorney, we're expected to do some free legal work for folks in the community who maybe can't afford legal work. And so one of the big projects that I do, Legal Aid Service of Oregon, they have an expungement process where, so the Oregon law says, say you got arrested for, actually, the cases that you mentioned, the like felony and the, what was it?
Oh,
Third degree.
Yeah.
So something like that, say you did that when you're 18 years old and you're trying to get a job when you're 30, and that's still on your record, you can actually get it expunged. So you file with the court and they say, oh, yep, that meets our statutory requirements. We'll take that off your record. So it won't show up in a background search for a job. So basically what I do is just help these folks who are like, hey, I, you know, had these charges from 10 years ago that are really affecting me getting the type of job I want in government or something. Can you help me get rid of it? And so we'll file with the court, and luckily we don't have to go to court for this, which is nice. But we'll just file and the judge will sign an order saying, yep, and it's removed from their record completely. There's also domestic violence, help through Lasso. They do like landlord tenant stuff. So tenants who are being evicted, they offer a lot of really good services. So yeah, basically just free legal work that helps folks in the community.
Nice. And then how do you get your clients? Are they referred through industry networks, corporate partnerships, or other means?
All over the place, honestly. So as an associate, most of my clients are partners because I'm working for the partner for their clients. And they get their clients from all over the place. Some of our clients we've had for 20, 30 years. Some of them come in from, you know, those clients we've had for 20, 30 years referring clients to us. Some is from, you know, going to networking events and things like that. Clients that I have brought in myself, I actually have a good connection with some business brokers and other, just, you go to a lot of networking events and meet people and they'll, you know, send you business. So things like that, or just, you know, sometimes random people will reach out to you and say, hey, I found you online. Can you help with this? And so we'll vet them a little bit, make sure it's a good fit, and can be all sorts of different ways. Some of them we've tried to pursue for years and finally get, some of them we're still pursuing and just, they won't bite. So it's yeah, all over really.
So a lot of relationship building too.
Absolutely. I probably go to a networking event at least every other week. Some of them are a little, I mean, low key, some are just at our firm, but some sort of thing where there are other people, whether it's attorneys or folks in different industries. So it's a lot of talking to folks and a lot of free food, which is great. Can't complain about that part.
Yeah, because I was thinking like, from the sports, entertainment, and media side,
Yeah.
like, do you see? We'll use, since I'm an Oregon Duck. Do you know? Is that like Dylan Gabriel, right, quarterback? When we were talking about NIL, and is that like, can you as an associate in there, like, I want to get this. I want to get this client and help, or is that something that like strategically your team, your firm looks at of, yes, we would like to bring them in? Like, what does that look like?
So I mean, if there's a client that I want and I pursue them and bring them in, then great. I usually have to have a partner just kind of oversee generally, because that's kind of our firm. I'm in my 5th year of practice. So I'm technically a senior associate, but I'm in my 1st year of that. So by year 7 or so, they're a little more like, oh, do do what you want, but you know, just have a partner sign off. So if I were to pursue, you know, any client, they will fully support that. And then provide the support that I need on the back end, which is really awesome. If there's someone that the firm is trying to go after as like a big client, we'll usually have kind of a team that's trying to, you know, pursue them and say, these are the folks you'd be working with, you know, that sort of thing. So it just kind of depends on the size of client, I think, how we go about that. And whether someone in the firm already has connections with them in some way too. So it's kind of just really depends. But the Miller Nash at least is really awesome about us being able to, you know, pursue whatever we want. Like if I said, hey, I want to do this type of law, you'd be like, okay, great. Like, what's your plan? Great, let's do it. As long as it's, you know, not some crazy thing that doesn't make sense and, you know, unrealistic. So
you had said like you are an associate and then a senior associate. What is that difference and how long does that take in moving?
yeah, so the way a lot of the bigger firms are structured, your first 2 years, you're what do they call it? Entry level? Not a junior associate. Anyway, you're kind of like a beginner associate, right? And then you move up to junior associate for year 3 and 4, and by year 5, you're a senior associate. Basically what that means is as you kind of move up, you have more experience and you can handle more tasks on your own without a lot of oversight. So partners will come to you with different levels of complexity saying, hey, I know you can handle this now. I'm going to give you this task. Or maybe you give this little piece to, you know, an associate, you oversee them doing it, and then I'll oversee that. So it means more responsibility, more in-depth tasks, really taking ownership of some clients, that sort of thing. It's just, yeah, getting more experience really is kind of what that means. So
And then that transition to partner.
it can, yeah. I mean, ideally, yes. So there are a couple different paths you can take. By year 7, between 7 and 10 is usually when folks at Miller Nash become a partner. And then, you know, you kind of keep working from there. You start as a like a non-equity partner, move up to an equity partner. But
And that means what's the difference between the two?
usually beginner versus once you become an equity partner, your partner, you buy into the firm, right?
Gotcha.
So it's just kind of moving up the chain.
Is it as
experience.
competitive as you often see or
No,
hear?
not really. So that's the one thing that, you know, I think at least my firm and the Oregon community, as I was mentioning before we started this, has that's really special and different than other states that I've heard of. Everyone is really helpful and friendly. And the folks I work with, no one is trying to do better than another. It's all like, oh, hey, can I help you? Or what support do you need? Or I think it's all very collegial and friendly. And I don't want to beat anyone that I work with. I want them to succeed, and we all do such different things too, right? That we're all following our own path, even if it's in the same area of law. So it's really cool to be like, oh my gosh, what are you working on? Cool. Like if I can help you with that, let me know. But I'm not going to try to like steal that work from you or something or that sort of thing. And you know, as many people as apply for partners already can become partners. So it's not really like we pick one a year and you got to fill that slot and be the best. It's very much do the best you can, and there are people there to support you. So
Nice.
yeah, it's great.
It's good to know that it's not that like cutthroat,
Oh my
very dog eat dog.
I actually have heard horror stories about like some of the Ivies where in law school people like hide books that you need for an assignment, and I was like, what? People do that? Like my school, everyone's like, hey, it's on this page of this book. I left it out for you on the table. Like Oregon is just such a different, special place. And as you mentioned, actually, with the, you know, going to school in Minneapolis or in Michigan and Minnesota. Thank you. I said Minneapolis and then Michigan.
One of those M's.
Minnesota, and then coming back, having gone to school here, I run into people that I went to school with all the time. So I did have that, you know, relationship building, or I'll go to an event and see, you know, someone I worked with in law school, or a professor or things like that. So really got to know some of these people and build good relationships. So it is just kind of a continuation of that. Hey, like we're here to support each other and make Oregon a good legal community. And Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, because there is that line of thinking that you have to go to one of the Ivies, and that like there's law firms that will only hire from the Ivies, that you can't get into a big firm because, you know, Miller Nash is a fairly, that's what, the
yeah.
third largest in the
In
in Oregon.
Yeah.
And so with that, that it doesn't matter necessarily so much where your law degree is from.
Yeah, and I mean, there are obviously big nationwide firms and international firms that do care a bit more, but I work alongside people who did go to Harvard and Yale, and I went to Willamette, so it's we've got a good contingent of Willamette, U of O, Lewis and Clark folks. So it's a good mix, and it, you know, just goes to show you, like, you could still achieve the same thing having gone to an Ivy and paying a lot less. So
Yeah.
But
So we talked a little bit about with the mergers and acquisitions and their business. Can you share share a little bit more about the sports, entertainment and media?
Yeah.
Because I know that is a side that probably a lot of people don't know about, but has a huge demand and need.
it does. So I don't know if any of you follow sports, but as I said before, NIL is becoming a really hot topic because it's changing so much. There's a big NCAA it's called house case settlement coming up that could change a lot of things in how NIL is treated. And so we're really focused on that. One of my coworkers, Max, is I think one of the leading people in NIL in Oregon, does a lot of research. So we do all sorts of work. Like I said before, we work with some sports teams, and actually I had an opportunity this summer to work with one of our sports teams, professional sports team up in Seattle. I traveled up to Seattle every week for 4 months, worked in their office 2 days a week full time for them. So got to do all sorts of stuff, just basically be ingrained in this team's, you know, office space and got to work with the folks there directly. So that was really neat. Got to go to some games.
Was it a professional sports
It was a
team?
professional sports team. Yep. Professional women's sports team up in Seattle. And it was a lot of fun, and I still do a bunch of work for them, but all from Portland now, which is great because traveling back and forth is a lot. But we work for sports teams. We do some NIL collective work. So that's the groups of folks who are getting these NIL deals for college athletes, and actually even some high school, potentially, which is
Damn.
crazy, but awesome.
Yeah.
On the entertainment and media side, I've done some really crazy, weird things that I've questioned, like, wow, I didn't know I would ever even think that I could do this as a lawyer. Some examples. So we represented some YouTube stars, and their, you know, different products that they sell and that sort of thing. And other folks just influencers, that sort of stuff. So one thing I had to do was, I've never played Fortnite before. I don't know if y'all are familiar. I imagine some of you. I had never played it. I didn't know any of the terms. I had to write a contract for a Fortnite map. I had to go spend an hour learning like terminology of Fortnite. And I was like, man, I wish I had like a sibling or someone who could explain this to me, because I'm literally reading an online dictionary for Fortnite for a client. And that one was really cool. And I think I still got some of the terms wrong because the partner overseeing it was like, yeah, no, we should probably use this word instead. But that one was interesting. Another one of our influencer clients wanted to build a giant room of trampolines, like rent out a space, build a trampoline room. So I had to look into like what sort of insurance provisions we should have for bringing in a bunch of trampolines for random people to jump around on, and you know, whether we could even do it, like if we needed permits for things. So really crazy, when you see those crazy YouTube videos, like all the stunts they're doing, there are so many attorneys behind that working out like what potential risks are there, what do we need to put in the contract, what are the fees we're going to pay, who's going to cover permits, all that kind of stuff. So I've learned some crazy things that I never thought I would know. I think, yeah, it's one of those very exciting things where you're like, oh, didn't even know like someone needed to think about this stuff. But then you see it out in the world and you're like, wow, I did that. like I worked on that. I made sure that could happen. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I hadn't really thought about it until I was like doing the research around this, that if you're a YouTuber or like TikTok, Instagram, like this influencer, and then even as an athlete, like you are a brand.
Absolutely.
And you need to protect your brand.
Yep.
And you talked a little bit about intellectual property.
Mhm.
Can you share more on that and branding?
Yeah, so a lot of the work we do that involves, this NIL, that sort of thing, it's the individual is licensing out their name, image, likeness, right? Or if they have, say, for example, it's a logo or a trademark or something like that, we will put together license agreements where they're actually giving someone an opportunity. So say, for example, you wanted to make a shirt with my face on it. And for some reason, I would have to sign a licensing agreement saying, yeah, I permit you to use this. But there would be all these provisions in there saying, well, if you get sued for using my face, because you're not allowed to, because say, for example, I had a different licensing agreement with someone else saying they're the sole person who can make shirts with my face on it. And I let you do that and you get sued. Then I would have to, if the agreement says, which is what we usually would have it say, have to defend you and pay for your legal fees for that, right? Because I promised you that you could make the shirt with my face on it, even though I knew that I already had this other person who I told was the sole person who could produce something with my face on it. And then I, went back on that deal. So there's lots of different IP pieces. We actually have an IP team who specializes in this as well. So I do a lot of the NIL, like trademark, that sort of stuff licensing, but they do a lot of patent licensing. Have you heard of patents before? Do you know what a patent is? So legally protected thing you can apply for with the patent office. It's a very expensive process, so defending them is well worthwhile. Takes a couple of years usually to get one as well. But it basically covers anything, right? Anything you can protect. If you draw a picture and it becomes famous, you have a copyright of it, right? Because you created this image, you want to protect it. So we can license things out like that. When we do some of the sponsorship work, there are rules around what the sponsor can show, say, for example, on a basketball court. I'm sure, have y'all been to a Blazers game before? You see how many sponsor deals there are. All of that is negotiated by someone like me, who is, I either work for the team or I work for the person sponsoring, and we work out, okay, you get to show this commercial for 30 seconds during halftime, and you get to show, this ad on one of the side banners for the whole game, or you get to do this or hand out free frisbees with, the logo of the team. And that, again, you're licensing the IP from that team, right? So you have to get permission for that. So it's this all a lot of interworking. I mean, even this, so you see on the walls here, we have a bunch of sponsor stuff, right? So this is probably has to do with some sort of, well, they just give you money, but I'm assuming you had to sign something saying you could use their logo on the wall.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of the kind of work that I do in sports entertainment media.
And it's ever evolving.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh yeah. As I said, NIL, lots of changes all the time. We're staying on top of that. And it's one of those things. We actually almost sent an agreement to a client in December, and then we're like, sorry, we got to hold this back. There are changes we want to consider because we don't want to tell you something or put something in agreement that's wrong. So ever evolving AI, social media. I mean, you probably see people claiming credit for other people's stuff on social media, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. So that's a huge thing. And just trying to, protect as much as you can without having to sue 900 different people. So it's a lot to keep track of with so much stuff online all the time.
Well, and you hear the stories of, like, especially with musicians, artists, that they start out earlier in their career and they have a contract, but like with a record company, but they don't really necessarily read all the way through the contract. And so in there, like, it is important then for them to have their own lawyer to make sure that they're being protected.
Absolutely. And that's, we've had situations where we're representing a company, and then the YouTuber, for example, is in conflict. So he mentioned conflicts before, right? Where you can't represent a husband and a wife in a divorce. That comes up a lot in my work, where we're representing the company that is the YouTubers, right? But the YouTuber wants to put their face on something, or the influencer wants to put their face on something and their brand and their name. And so we actually have to get a separate attorney, or the person has to get a separate attorney. And we work with that attorney because that attorney will have that person's best interest in mind while we have the company's best interest in mind. So it's an internal conflict of interest, but it does come up and we'll say, you know what, you need to get your own attorney because we're going to be negotiating against each other here. So that's happened a number of times in deals where it's a lot more attorneys than you would think you need because there are so many different sides, even though it's really working towards the same goal of getting out a product with this logo or brand on it, and making money.
Nice. So what does a typical work week look like? Because I know days always change. So kind of a snapshot of your week.
Every week is so drastically different. I actually have a calendar that is shared with my partner where it's like, this is what I have after work this week. This is what I have during the day this week. Just so like, I remember where I'm going to be during the day because coming to something like this, or, you know, if I'm going to work in our Vancouver office or our Seattle office. But day to day, I get in first 15 minutes. Our office policy is completely hybrid. So I can work remote whenever I want, which is awesome because instead of jeans and a nice shirt, I wear sweats and a nice shirt for video calls. And then we have an office downtown. So I go in probably 3-4 days a week. They give us free lunch on Wednesdays, so I always go on Wednesdays. But get in first 15 minutes or so, I spend just going through emails, kind of assessing. I have a running list of all the different tasks I need that are sorted by importance and due date, that sort of thing. Something that's kind of unique about a bigger firm. As I've said before, my clients, for the most part, are considered the partners. So I could work for 6 different partners at the same time. And they know I might be working for another partner, but they're like, well, I don't care. Like my task is due on this day, so I need you to get it done by this day. So it's a lot of managing of like, okay, I have to do this thing for this partner by this day and this thing by this day. How long is this going to take? How long will this take? And then also, this sounds bad, but just getting to some tasks and be like, wow, this is so boring. Like I need to split this up into 3 days because I'm not going to finish it one day. And that's just, I mean, any job you have, that's gonna come up. Like you're gonna have something you're like, I don't want to do this. And that happens very rarely. I will say, absolutely love what I do. So, but kind of assess what I need to get done, check and see if there are any emails with really time sensitive, we call them fire drills, where someone's like, hey, I need this in the next 2 hours. Like, okay, cool. I'll drop what I was in the middle of and turn to this other thing. And then from there, just start working on whatever I've got going. So it could be yesterday, let's see, I spent 3 hours preparing and revising a purchase agreement for an asset purchase of a business, spent another couple hours on another purchase agreement for a towboat company. Learned all about towboats, which was really interesting and not something I thought I would ever learn about. But what else did I do? I worked on actually, so one of the teams that we work with, I finalized a licensing agreement for their band that comes and plays during their halftime shows. We're licensing the logo to them. That one's pretty cool. And then an independent contractor agreement for that same sports team client. So they, use independent contractors to come do various tasks, medical things like chiropractic work, that sort of stuff. So what am I doing today? I don't even know. This, and then we'll see when I get back.
So you have to, like, time management is
Absolutely
definitely important.
Time management and communication. So there are a lot of partners who would rather me come to them and say, hey, I've got this other thing that I need to get done today because it is so time sensitive. And they'll go to the client and say, hey, this is just taking a little longer than expected. We'll get it to you. So it's a lot of communication, which is great in any part of life, and time management, which again, if you want to be an attorney, very key skill to develop. So yeah.
Do any of you have any questions?
Working at a college, how long were you for a job?
Let's see, I started working at a finance firm probably a month after I graduated. I had a friend who worked there already, so it was an easy connection. But then was out of undergrad from law school, was about 3 years.
And then where do you see yourself wanting to grow in your career?
Yeah, hopefully keep doing the same thing. I love all the work I do. Even the bad days are not bad, they're just meh, which I've had some jobs before where it's like, even the good days are not good. So I really love the work that I do, and it's very exciting, fast paced, different every day. My goal is to move up to partner eventually. One of the routes that many people take, especially as a corporate attorney, is going in-house, which basically means you go, say, for example, Intel, because they're on the wall there. Intel has a team of attorneys that work just at Intel. And so they do all Intel stuff. Some of them are in different departments where they do all, risk management or things like that. So that's a potential route to go in-house with a client, but I really love my firm, and I don't know. We'll see.
So does somebody like Nike have their own in-house attorneys
They do.
or?
Yep, so Nike has a huge team of attorneys. And then what, just depending on the size of the company, so there are some companies that maybe have one in-house counsel person. And how we get their work is it's something either they don't want to handle, can't handle, or it's just an area of law that they don't specialize in, right? Or don't really know. So a lot of times stuff that I'm getting from folks that have, or companies that have in-house counsel, it's just more than they can handle, right? It's, we need 5 agreements a month, or 5 agreements a week, and we've got one person in-house and we just don't have the capacity to draft it. Or almost all in-house attorneys will refer out litigation, just because you're building a huge court case and you need a lot of resources. Other than like major companies, I think they do tend to have some folks in-house that handle some cases, but yeah.
And so then like for Trailblazers, since that's a pro team here.
Yeah.
Do they have their own
They
in-house
do.
counsel?
They have at least 3, I believe. Maybe 4 folks for attorneys in-house.
And then, so if you've got the Trailblazers, and then if there's a player on the team, do they have their own lawyer, or do they have, that's outside of the Blazers?
Yeah. So the way that works, say there's a player on a team, their interests, although they work for the team, the attorneys at the team are representing the team, right? They're representing the company that is the Blazers, or whatever other team. They're not representing the individual players in the sense that they have the individual players, I guess. So obviously, I don't want to say this wrong. They have the players' interests in mind, right? Because they want to do what's best for the team, but they're not going to be out advising the players, hey, you should take this deal and sign for more money, right? Because that is not what their job is. They're representing the best interest of the team and what the team's doing, and risk management as a business and all the employees. And so it's everything that's overarching the Blazers company, whereas players will go, I assume most have their own attorney that is representing them specifically, and will go negotiate, deals, or if they're getting sued, we'll represent them in that, or hire an attorney to do so. So, yeah, it's pretty neat. A lot of attorneys involved.
We're gonna read up more about.
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm sure if you just Google like in-house attorneys sports teams, you probably get some stuff. There are a couple organizations. There's one, WISE, it's Women in Sports and Events, which is targeted towards women, but has a lot of the folks who work in-house at these teams in various departments, so not just legal. They, have some forums and things like that, which is really interesting. But that's a good question. I can ask around. I'll give you guys my email address, and you can email me, and then I'll follow up with you, because I don't know.
Yeah, it's exciting that the WNBA is coming.
Oh, it's so exciting. Yes, yes, we are stoked about that.
Yeah.
and owned by the Thorns owner as
Mhm.
well, so,
About your jobs.
what do you mean?
It's like, how would I look up more about your job?
You can look at my bio on my website, or the Miller Nash website. It's a little outdated. I haven't updated it in probably a year, but it kind of talks about some of the stuff I've worked on, and it doesn't name any clients. We can share who our clients typically are, but we're just a little cautious about it in certain circumstances. But yeah, that'd be a good spot. Actually, Max Forer is the partner who works at my firm, who's the one I was talking about earlier, who is really kind of leading the NIL charge in Oregon. He's written a couple articles about NIL and just college sports and that sort of thing. So he'd be a good resource. You just Google Max Forer, it'd pop up.
And what are some of the trends that you are seeing happen and become more important to navigate? I mean, besides the NIL.
Oh, good question. Technology, definitely a big one. Just how do we deal with AI? How is it going to come into, clients, systems and that sort of thing? I have one client who did a training on how to use AI in the workspace, and they have the executive level of ChatGPT, which doesn't keep. So I don't know if you'd all know how ChatGPT, say you put in my first and last name, ChatGPT can use that to output something to someone else, right? It's learning, it's evolving, it's providing information when people ask questions. With the executive level one, it's private, so it shouldn't be taking information you put in to develop other answers. So it is supposed to protect confidential information. It is supposed to. I don't know how well it works.
That's what I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those like, do
Yeah.
we know how this is doing that? But so how AI is going to be integrated into our clients' work, and if they expect us to have that integrated, and our firm has an AI policy where it's kind of as you mentioned, you'd never want AI to write something that you're giving a client, because one, it's not your work product. Two, AI has been known to just blatantly lie and make up cases, and someone has gotten in trouble for that, I think multiple times. And then three, it's just not, it's not really ethical. But if you need an idea of like, oh, how should I start this thing? You can kind of use it as like an idea, like the brainstorming session, right? But nothing beyond that. And so I think that's kind of the biggest thing is just this, it's a huge buzz topic, right? AI, what is it going to be? How's it going to work? Whose job is it going to take? And I can tell you, I feel very comfortable that AI is not going to be able to write the kind of agreements that I write anytime soon. So I feel very safe. But it's on the forefront of people's minds.
And then what does the future job outlook look like for careers in corporate and entertainment law?
Awesome. My firm is hiring like crazy. We've hired like 5 people in the last month, a lot of associates, and that's in all industries, not just my departments, I guess. But I mean, you graduated in 2010. That was a tough time. We had the recession. I graduated in 2020, tough time, COVID, everyone was getting laid off. I think, we're coming out of that still, and law firms are really doing well and a lot of work, and businesses are, for the most part, seeming to thrive and need. And I guess one piece I didn't mention, part of my work is just general business advising. So say you own a business and you're like, hey, I don't know how I should handle this thing. What should I do? You can come to me and I say, oh, let's do this, or this is how we do this, or, or hey, I want to sell some stock because I want to get a new investor. Oh, cool, great. I'll help you with that. So there's always work there. Businesses will always need legal help, whether they use it or not. I can only say so much to that, but every business that is, of a certain size should have an attorney they go to regularly. Businesses will always buy and sell. So it's the NIL thing is only becoming more popular. Compared to 10 years ago, we have so many more influencers, YouTubers, TikTokers that we never used to have. So there's just this huge pool of people who need these agreements that never did before. So you're seeing it on a higher level of, I have a client who she's a small client, but she just makes TikTok videos and has like hundreds of thousands of followers and does these one-off deals. And I review the contract real quick and say, yep, that looks good. You can sign with, Aloe Yoga or whatever and get paid $5,000 for a video. And it's just, you never used to have that sort of stuff. So, if you want to be a sports entertainment media lawyer or M&A, there's, I think, going to be a lot of work for a long time.
This is a question for both of you. So how, in setting your legal fees, so you obviously, Nathan, being a smaller law firm, versus working at a big corporate, like, how does that work?
I can do whatever I want.
It's true though.
Within reason.
Yeah.
So there are kind of like, I don't treat it as like gospel, but there are kind of like set like amounts for like hourly rates in different regions of the country and different types of law and things like that. So we work on either an hourly rate where we bill, okay, we worked 5 hours and at this rate, and there's your bill. Or we do flat fees. So especially for estate planning, if we know kind of all the pieces that we need to put together, we'll say, okay, it's going to be X number of dollars up front. It's going to be $3,000, $5,000, whatever the thing is, to do this, piece, and we define what we're going to do, and then the client just knows, okay, that's my fee to you guys, and I'm not going to wonder, oh my gosh, how big is the bill going to be later, kind of thing. So we try to do as many of the flat fees as we can. And then for stuff that's more like litigation or in court and stuff like that, usually we do hourly rates. But I try to set it like my hourly rate. Well, it's $3.50 an hour. Sounds like a lot. I'm not like all throughout the day, right? Like I work 45, 50 hours a week. I don't bill that much time. So I'm not making $350 an hour for 50 hours a week or something. Because there's tons of time in there where I can't really bill it to a specific client, depending on what kind of work I'm doing, especially if it's internal work on my firm, or communications with people that just aren't really related to a specific case. And then that's kind of the way that law firms bring in money too, is by whatever that, whatever they're paying the lawyer or the firm. And traditionally, it's always been, well, the lawyer does the hourly rate, maybe the paralegal or someone also charges like a lesser rate or something like that. But that's how all the money gets put in and pays everything else, right? So it pays all the other employees, like the receptionists, like pays people to clean the office, pays and all that kind of stuff. So that's not like a salary, but that is kind of the way that worked. But now that I got off that, I don't know.
Ours is set by the firm. So we have 150 attorneys across all our offices. We have probably 250 or more employees, which includes like an accounting department, HR department. We have a billing department. We have 2 in-house attorneys that just advise on like our ethical obligations and whether we can take cases and probably like situations that our attorneys get into. So they take all of that into account at setting our hourly rates, and it's based on, at least for associates, it's based on the year you graduated from law school. So I'm at the same level as everyone I graduated from. I get paid the same as everyone, or every year I graduated from law school, I get paid the same as all of them. And it's a step up. So every year you charge more, you get paid more. Once you become a partner, they still do the kind of step up. I'm not entirely sure how it works, just because it doesn't affect me.
You're not there yet.
Not yet, yeah. And then their pay is based off of, once you become a partner, it's based off of clients, like how much you're actually billing. So I get paid a flat salary. And then if I get up to a certain number of hours, I get a bonus. The partners they have their own clients and they get a certain percentage of what they bill to the client. And then me as the associate working on their client, they get some portion of what I bill to the client. So they're making money if I'm billing for their client as well. And then, as you mentioned, some of that stuff goes up to, we've got at least 100 people to pay out of attorney's fees. So it's, hourly rate does not equal anywhere close to actual pay, but.
And then if you bring in a client, do you get a bonus or?
No, we track it to see, how much like book, what my book of business is, what we call it, a book of business is like my clients, right? And that's something when you're going up for partnership that they consider how many clients you brought in, what your receipts, so that's how much a client has paid to the firm. So say you bill a client, just to make numbers easy, $10,000 over the year, but they only pay you 5,000 and that you never collect the other 5. So your receipts are 5,000. So, you know, it shows I worked this many hours and brought in this client. So I don't get credit for it the same way a partner would until I become a partner. But it is tracked. So it's just looks good.
In our area, how much can an attorney just starting out be looking to make within the first few years?
I think that drastically depends on what type of law you do, where you work, that sort of thing. My first law job, I worked, my billable hour requirement was 1,200 hours, which is like 4 billable hours a day. Like it's not a lot of work. And I was paid 66,000. My next job, which was still kind of beginner, it didn't have an hourly requirement, but I had to be at work like 8.5 to 9 hours a day. And I think I started at like 82. First year attorneys at my firm now make like 145. So it depends the size of the firm. It depends, you know, what kind of law. If you go to one of the really big nationwide firms, your starting salary is like 230 or something. It's insane, but those are the very competitive where like you don't I don't want to get into it, but and then
Longer hours.
crazy hours, like crazy hours. You don't really know a lot of your coworkers. You're working on little pieces of stuff rather than like overall picture sometimes. And but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the structure of the smaller firms, well, I've only worked at 2 firms, so the one that I worked with initially, I think my base salary was like, that was just on the state, like indigent defense contract stuff was like 45,000 a year, and then I could get my own clients and build those. So I think early on I was making about similar to you. I think with the stuff that I did on my own outside of that, it was about 65,000 or so for the first several years. And then obviously it is different when you own a business too, because you have more control over that. And you got to take the losses, you got to take the wins though too. So right, the last few years I've been pretty consistent at about 180 to 200,000 a year, like, but I'm the owner of the firm too. So like the people just starting out with me now are in the like 60 to 70,000 kind of range. If they're a new attorney, they're starting out, we're training them, we're doing all that. And then they have the ability to go and earn more if they want to work more. So we're pretty flexible. I liked what you said about like if your firm is supportive of if you want to go do some other area of law or like this kind of thing. Like I think that's really great, you know, for people to be able to do. We definitely work kind of in a similar way where as long as it's not something that like we don't have the staff to be able to help you, then we encourage that. So it's a little bit of for me, it's always been kind of like a little bit of salary, and then you can earn more on top of that. Depends on how hard you want to work and how much time you want to spend. So.
And I know we're almost out of time, so just one last question for you both to leave with is like, what are some key skills and qualities that you would recommend for students to start developing now as they look at moving forward and pursuing a legal career?
I mean, for me, it's just always, I think, it's the communication piece, like you said. I mean, it's the interpersonal communication. It's the ability to listen, not just to what people are saying or telling you, but I mean, be thinking of, okay, why are they asking me that, or why are they, you know, explaining that? So I think just the interpersonal side, I think if you continue to work on that, that'll get you anywhere that you need to be, because you can learn the stuff. But for me, that's the overall virtue one that I think of. So I know that's kind of a softer skill. It's not like, hey, go learn, you know, go learn the tax code or go learn some random, you know, thing. But for me, that's where I've found the most help, I think, no matter what. So.
Yeah, because it's important not just only in knowing how to speak, but also how to listen.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'd say actually pretty similar to that is just taking opportunities to go meet people and speak to people and listen to people. Because I mean, a lot of fields, not just law, people get jobs from people that they know, which is just, it's, you get to know someone and they trust you and they're like, hey, this job opened up. Like, I want you to come work with me. As that did with me, my friend works at this firm and I wouldn't have applied if it weren't for that. So it's the communication and getting really good at talking to people and being able to ask questions. And a lot of law, if you decide to go into law, is talking to people and listening to people and dealing with oftentimes some really difficult people that you can't you just have to deal with because they're your client and they're paying you, and there's no reason for you to fire them, or if they haven't fired you. And sometimes you just have to be okay with that. So it's a lot of people skills, and just being able to kind of roll with whatever. And I think one other thing that's not really a skill, but something that I really love to tell people who are, especially high school, just because your path doesn't go exactly how you pictured it doesn't mean you won't still get there, because mine went completely like roundabout way to like getting to be an attorney, which I'd thought about and I like never would have expected, but I still ended up kind of one of the places I wanted to be. And that even as far as like the school I chose, like working at other firms, like all of these different things were like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with my life? I don't want to do this. And now I'm like doing exactly the work I want to do. So it's just stressful, but you'll get there.
Nice.
Well, thank
Any
you
last
so much.
last questions? Anything online?
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm